The Whispering Woods had always been a place of peace by day. Lush trees, birdsong, and sunlight spilling through the canopy. But at night, the locals whispered of something else, something dark and hungry that moved through the trees. The stories warned of people who entered and never returned. But four friends, Samantha, Jake, Ethan, and Claire, laughed it off. They were there for a weekend camping trip, eager to enjoy the fresh air and disconnect. As they arrived at dusk, the forest felt welcoming enough. But when night fell, the change was immediate. The trees, once serene, seemed to grow taller, more menacing, their branches casting eerie, finger-like shadows. A heavy silence replaced the usual hum of insects. Samantha glanced around uneasily. Samantha, softly. "It's too quiet. I don't like this." Ethan, chuckling. "Relax. It's just the woods at night. Spooky, but harmless." But then the first sound came. A soft rustling, like leaves brushing together. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, creeping closer. Jake stood, shining his flashlight into the darkness, but it showed only trees. Still, the rustling continued, like whispers between the trees themselves. Jake, calling out, "Is someone out there?" No reply, but the rustling turned into a low, rhythmic creak, as if the trees were swaying, though no wind blew. Claire clutched her jacket, her voice shaking. "Claire, something's not right. I think we should leave." Suddenly, a loud snap rang out, the sound of a tree branch breaking off. Ethan spun toward the noise just in time to see a massive branch fall, narrowly missing him. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the trees seemed to close in, their branches stretching toward the group like fingers. Panic set in. Samantha, yelling, "We have to go! Now!" They grabbed their bags, but the trees were moving. Actually moving. What once stood tall and still now leaned unnaturally, their bark twisting as they reached out with gnarled roots and limbs. Jake stumbled as roots coiled around his ankle, pulling him toward the darkness. He screamed, trying to break free, but the tree's roots were like iron. Jake, screaming, "Help! It's got me!" Ethan and the others tried to pull him free, but it was no use. The tree's roots lifted Jake into the air, wrapping around his body. His eyes widened in horror as the bark of the tree split open, revealing a hollow, gaping maw lined with jagged wooden teeth. The tree swallowed him whole, his screams cutting off abruptly. The remaining three fled, stumbling through the undergrowth, but the forest was no longer a place of escape. The trees seemed to shift, blocking their path, their branches lashing out like living whips. Claire was the next to fall, roots wrapped around her waist, yanking her into the shadows before anyone could react. Claire, crying out, "No! No! Don't leave me!" Her voice faded as the forest consumed her, leaving only the unnatural rustling of the trees. Samantha and Ethan ran until their lungs burned, but the woods had turned into a maze. The trees shifted, their branches closing in, the ground beneath them shifting like something alive. Ethan tripped, and before Samantha could help him, a tree's branch impaled him through the chest, lifting him off the ground. His body twitched before going limp, blood trickling down the bark. Ethan, gasping, "Run! Sam!" Samantha, now alone, sprinted through the woods, but there was nowhere to go. The forest closed around her, its branches reaching for her like claws. She turned in every direction, but the trees were alive, moving with purpose. She heard the whispers again, louder now. Whispers. "You cannot escape." A massive oak loomed ahead, its bark cracking open like a mouth. The roots surged up from the ground, wrapping around Samantha's legs. She screamed, fighting to break free, but it was useless. The tree dragged her closer, and the last thing she saw was the dark, hollow maw of the ancient tree. By morning, the campsite was deserted. The authorities searched for the missing campers, but no trace was found. The woods stood tall and still in the daylight, as if nothing had happened. The only sound was the soft rustling of leaves, as if the trees were whispering secrets to one another, waiting for their next prey.